The coffee machine spit a mouthful of hot espresso directly onto Nessa Fairbanks's white uniform collar at 7:43 in the morning, and somehow that was the most predictable part of her entire day. She stood there for a moment, holding the portafilter, staring down at the brown stain spreading across her chest like a small personal catastrophe. The Auberge du Lac's kitchen was already humming, line cooks calling out orders, the breakfast rush beginning to press against the double doors, steam rising from the soup station in soft, indifferent clouds. And Nessa just stood there thinking, of course. The machine's been temperamental since Tuesday, said Dex, the prep cook who had been working the station next to her for 3 years and still greeted every morning like it had personally offended him. He handed her a clean cloth without looking up from his mise en place. I told Chef Bouchard. He said it was character. Character, Nessa repeated. His word. She blotted the collar, knowing it wouldn't help, knowing the stain would still be visible at the pass-through window when she plated the 7:45 amuse-bouche for the dining room, knowing that Chef Bouchard would notice and say something just loud enough for the rest of the kitchen to hear. She knew all of this because it had happened before. It would happen again. Nessa Fairbanks had been working at Auberge du Lac, a boutique lakeside restaurant in Muskoka, Ontario, the kind of place that appeared in Toronto Life twice a year and had a 3-month waitlist from May to September for 4 years. She had started as a line cook, moved up to sous chef in the pastry section, and had, in the last 18 months, quietly, become the person who designed most of the dessert menu while her name appeared on exactly 0 of the menu cards the front of house presented to guests with a small cards read. Executive Pastry Chef René Bouchard. René Bouchard had been at the restaurant for 11 years. He was 62, had trained in Lyon, owned 7 scarves, and had not actually created a new dessert recipe in approximately 4 of those 11 years. Nessa knew this. Dex knew this. The entire kitchen knew this. What the dining room knew was only what René chose to perform for them during the occasional table visit. A slow walk between the white-clothed tables, hands clasped behind his back, accepting compliments for the lavender honey panna cotta that Nessa had developed during a rainy Tuesday last October when he was in Montreal attending a conference. She had made it 3 times before he tasted it, adjusted the honey ratio by a fraction, and declared it ready for the menu, his name. Her hands, Nessa. Dex spoke quietly, not looking up. He's coming. She straightened, tucked the cloth away, picked up her tasting spoon. René Bouchard pushed through the kitchen doors with the particular energy of someone who believed their arrival was an event. He was a tall man, silver-haired, wearing a chef's coat so pristine it suggested he had never actually touched food in it. He scanned the kitchen the way a general might review a field, and his eyes landed on Nessa's collar. He said nothing about it directly. Instead, he said to no one in particular, "Presentation begins before the plate." Nessa didn't look up. "The panna cotta for tasting menu," he continued, arriving at her station. "I want the honey from the Halliburton producer, not the Niagara. There's a difference in the floral notes. I already switched it," Nessa said. He looked at her for a moment. "Good." A pause. "And the elderflower garnish, the sprigs last night redo the prep. Don't have the new who're do it. Do it yourself." She met his eyes then, just briefly. "Of course." He moved away. The kitchen exhaled. Dex made a sound under his breath that was not quite a word. That was the texture of her days, precise, relentless, and invisibly hers. The Auberge du Lac closed to the public on Mondays, which meant Monday mornings were for prep, and Mondays at noon were, officially, staff lunch. Unofficially, staff lunch was the 1 hour per week when the kitchen became a slightly more human place. Music was permitted. Dex brought his personal hot sauce collection, and Nessa's 7-year-old daughter Margot sat in the corner booth by the window with her coloring books and her very strong opinions about which shade of blue was the correct color for lake water. "It's not that blue," Margot said, holding up a crayon called Cerulean Dreams and comparing it to the actual lake visible through the window. "What color is it then?" Nessa asked, sliding into the booth across from her with 2 bowls of the pasta the kitchen had made from yesterday's extra dough. Margot studied the lake with the seriousness of someone conducting a formal assessment. She was a small child with Nessa's dark eyes and her late father's habit of tilting her head slightly to the right when she was thinking. "More like pewter," she said finally, "with some green. But not regular green, like if green was tired green, you know what I mean." Nessa did know what she meant. That was the thing about Margot. She was consistently, uncannily accurate in ways that were difficult to articulate. Like tired green. That was exactly the color of the lake in September. Margot's father, Nessa's ex-husband Thomas, had been gone for 4 years. Not gone as in dead, but gone as in Vancouver, as in remarried, as in a Christmas card that arrived each year with a return address Nessa never used. The divorce had been quiet, the way quiet things sometimes are when two people simply stop recognizing each other across a kitchen table. She didn't miss him, exactly. She missed the version of her life that had made sense on paper. What she had instead was Margot and this job and a rented house 20 minutes from the restaurant, with a small herb garden on the back porch that Margot had named individually. The basil was Gerald, the rosemary was Dot. The thyme didn't have a name yet because, Margot explained, you couldn't rush that kind of thing. Nessa had learned not to question the herb garden's social structure. Is the soup man coming back? Margot asked, twirling pasta. What soup man? The one who sat at table 4 last week and ate the mushrooms bisque and looked at the kitchen window for a long time. Nessa glanced toward the dining room. I don't know which guest you mean. He tipped 28%, Margot said. I heard Talia talking about it. Talia was their most experienced front-of-house server, a woman of approximately 40 who kept a mental ledger of every tip she had ever received and could recite them chronologically. If Talia had mentioned 28%, the guest had been notable. I don't think we get to know which guests come back, Nessa said. Margot considered this. I think he'll come back, she said, and returned to her pasta in the decisive way that indicated the conversation was, for her, concluded. He came back on Wednesday. Nessa didn't see him. She rarely saw guests, operating as she did behind the pass-through, in the language of plates and temperature and timing. But Talia appeared at the kitchen door at 7:30 with the particular expression that meant she had something to report. Table 4 ordered the full tasting menu, Talia said, and specifically requested to know about the lavender panna cotta. Not just ordered it, asked how it was made. Guests ask that sometimes. He asked for specifics, the honey source, the infusion time, whether the lavender was fresh or dry. Talia paused. He was taking notes. Nessa looked up from the plate she was composing. Notes? In a small notebook. Black. Like a journalist, but his jacket was better. Better than a journalist's jacket. Much better. Also, he asked if the chef would be available to speak with him after service. Nessa assumed this meant Renee, who occasionally held court at the bar after closing, accepting compliments with the gracious modesty of a man who had never once considered whether he deserved them. I'll let Chef Bouchard know. Talia lingered. Something else? Nessa asked. He asked for the pastry chef specifically. A brief silence. Chef Bouchard is the pastry chef, Nessa said. I know. Talia looked at her for a moment. I'm just telling you what he asked. His name, she learned later, was Fletcher Crane. She didn't learn it that night. She learned it 3 days later, when Renee swept into the kitchen on Saturday morning with the specific energy of someone who had received good news and was deciding how to deploy it. We've had an inquiry, he announced to the kitchen at large, from a group looking to open a lakeside property in Perry Sound. High-end. The kind of project that requires a culinary director who can build a program from the ground up. He straightened his scarf. They've asked to meet with me next week. The kitchen offered the appropriate murmurs. Dex caught Nessa's eye across the station. She looked away. Later, when the morning prep was done and the kitchen had thinned out, she found herself at the pass-through window, writing out the weekend specials in the careful shorthand she had developed over years of menus and margins. Talia came through with a folded piece of paper. Table 4 left this, she said, from Wednesday. He asked me to make sure it reached the person responsible for the panna cotta. Nessa unfolded it. It was a business card, handwritten on the back. The technical precision and ingredient sourcing in the dessert program suggest serious culinary intent. I'd like to speak with the person actually building it. F. Crane, Northgate Hospitality Group. She read it twice, then she put it in her apron pocket, finished the specials board and went back to work. That night, she stood on the back porch in the dark, listening to the basil and the rosemary and the unnamed thyme do whatever it is, herbs do at 11 o'clock at night. And she took the card out again. The person actually building it. She hadn't told anyone she'd kept the card. She was not entirely sure why she hadn't thrown it away. Fletcher Crane arrived the following Tuesday not as a guest but as something more inconvenient, a new hire. This was not immediately apparent. What was apparent at 8 in the morning when Nessa arrived to find a man she didn't recognize reorganizing the walk-in refrigerator was that someone had let a stranger into her kitchen. Excuse me, she said. He turned. He was perhaps 40, with the kind of face that suggested he had spent time outdoors in weather, and he was wearing a kitchen apron over clothes that, as Talia had accurately observed, were better than a journalist's. He was holding a container of creme fraiche and reading the label with the focused attention of someone who genuinely wanted to know what was in it. "Sauce Chef Fairbanks," he said. She stopped. How do you know my name? The specials board. He nodded toward the pass-through. Your handwriting. Same as the note on the honey order in the walk-in. You initial things differently than Chef Bouchard. You loop your F, he blocks his. She looked at him for a long moment. Who are you? Finn Coleridge, he said. Chef Bouchard hired me as a stage this week. Trial run. He set down the creme fraiche. He thought it would be useful to have an extra hand. A stage. A kitchen internship typically reserved for culinary students and young professionals building their resumes. Finn Coleridge did not look like a culinary student. He looked like someone who had spent a significant number of years doing something that required wearing good jackets and asking precise questions about honey sourcing. She should have asked more questions. She didn't because Renee chose that moment to arrive, and because in Renee's presence it was generally easier to simply begin working. What she noticed about Finn Coleridge over the following days was this. He was quiet in the way that capable people are quiet, the way that suggests they are observing rather than simply waiting. He made no errors on the tasks Renee assigned him, which were deliberate in their simplicity. Portioning, prep work, basic garnish assembly. He did not perform enthusiasm. He did not volunteer information. He asked careful, specific questions about suppliers, about recipes, about the timing of the Tuesday prep schedule versus the weekend rush. And on Thursday afternoon, when Renee had left the kitchen to take a call and the remaining staff were moving through the afternoon prep in the comfortable rhythm of midweek, Finn Coleridge appeared at Nessa's station and said quietly, "The lavender honey panna cotta. The Halliburton honey. Is that a recent switch, or has it always been that source?" She kept her eyes on the tempered chocolate she was working. "Recent. Your call or Bouchard's?" A pause. "Why are you asking?" He didn't answer immediately then. "The specials for last month, the elderflower sorbet, the maple semi-freddo, the rhubarb tart with the cardamom cream. The flavor logic runs through them in a consistent direction. That's not random, and it's not," he paused carefully. "It's not the same sensibility as the older menu." She set down her spatula. She looked at him directly. "What are you actually doing here?" Finn Coleridge looked at her for a moment with the expression of someone who has been waiting for a specific question and is considering how much of the answer to give. "Learning the kitchen," he said, and then he went back to his station. Margot met him on Monday. She was in her corner booth, engaged in a heated internal debate about the correct color for pine needles. She had ultimately landed on something between army green and the inside of an avocado, when Finn arrived early for the afternoon prep and found the restaurant unlocked and quiet. He sat down at the counter, apparently comfortable with the silence, and waited. Margot studied him from the booth with the unblinking assessment of a child who has not yet learned that staring is considered impolite. "You're the new kitchen person," she said. "I am," he said. "Do you like it, the kitchen? The restaurant, the lake, Muskoka?" She waved a hand vaguely, indicating, apparently, all of Ontario. "Some people don't like it here. I like it very much," he said. Margot appeared to file this away. "My mum made the honey dessert," she said. "The one with the flowers." He nodded slowly. "It's excellent. She makes it at home too sometimes, but at home she uses store honey because the special honey is expensive, and she says that's for the restaurant, not for us." Margot paused thoughtfully. "But it tastes good with store honey too. I think she's better than the restaurant lets her be." Finn Coleridge was quiet for a moment. "I think you might be right about that," he said. Nessa appeared from the kitchen at that moment with 2 cups of tea and stopped when she saw him. She looked from Finn to Margot and back to Finn. "She introduced herself," Finn said. "I gathered." Nessa set 1 cup down at the counter. "Margot, did you tell him your name?" "Of course," Margot said with mild offense. "I'm not feral." This was, apparently, a phrase she had recently acquired because she had been using it with some frequency. Nessa had chosen not to investigate its origin. "She was telling me about the herb garden," Finn said. "Gerald and Dot." Nessa looked at her daughter, who was now coloring with great focus and the studied innocence of someone who knew exactly what she had done. "She talks a lot," Nessa said, to no one in particular. "She's accurate," Finn said. "That's different." On the following Friday evening, René Bouchard announced at the pre-service meeting that he would be leaving for a week in late October to consult with the Parry Sound Development Group. "In my absence," he said, "South Chef Fairbanks will manage the kitchen." He said this the way someone might announce that the coffee machine would be handling things, functionally, without sentiment. Nessa nodded. This was not the first time she had run the kitchen in his absence, and it would not be the first time she did so without any formal acknowledgement that she was capable of it. What was different this time was Finn Coleridge. who was standing near the end of the line and who, when Renee made this announcement, wrote something very briefly in the small black notebook he occasionally produced. Nessa noticed this the way she noticed most things in her kitchen, peripherally, precisely, and without letting on. The week Renee was in Parry Sound was the best week of cooking Nessa had had in approximately 2 years. It wasn't simply that the kitchen ran smoothly without him. It was that without his presence, without the constant reorientations of energy toward managing his expectations, the kitchen became what it was supposed to be, a place where people cooked. Dex played his music at a volume slightly above regulation. The line cooks moved with a looseness they didn't usually allow themselves. Nessa changed 3 things on the dessert menu. Not dramatically, not visibly, just shifts in emphasis, a new textural element in the chocolate torte, a different garnish approach for the pear sorbet. And the feedback from the front of house was immediate and unanimous. Table 7 asked if something had changed. Table 12 said the dessert course was the best they'd had all season. Talia appeared at the kitchen window on Wednesday night with an expression that was, for Talia, effusive. Table 4 asked to thank the chef personally, she said. Which chef? Talia looked at her. Nessa went out. She did not typically go into the dining room. She was a kitchen person. She existed behind the glass in the pass-through, in the language of heat and timing. But she pushed through the doors and walked to table 4, which was the table by the window that looked out over the lake, and found Fletcher Crane sitting there with his small black notebook open beside his water glass. He looked up when she approached, and she understood, in the particular way that late realizations arrive, all at once, and slightly too obviously, that Fletcher Crane and Finn Coleridge were the same person. She stopped. He stood. Nessa Fairbanks, he said. You're Fletcher Crane. He said it simply, without apology or performance. I'm the founding partner of Northgate Hospitality Group. We're developing 3 properties across Ontario over the next 2 years. The Parry Sound project that Renee Bouchard is currently consulting on is one of them. She was quiet for a moment. The dining room moved softly around them. Other tables, other conversations, the sound of the lake through the window, the faint distant call of something that might have been a loon. Why were you in my kitchen? She asked. Because your card, the one you didn't send back, told me you were the right person, he said. But I needed to see how you ran a kitchen before I made an offer. I couldn't do that from a dining room table. You came in as a stage. Renee needed the help and I needed the access. I wasn't trying to deceive you. He paused. I was trying to find out if what I suspected was true, and what did you suspect? That the person building the program here wasn't the person getting credit for it. She held his gaze. Outside, the lake was doing its September thing, pewter and green the way Margot had said. I have a proposal, Fletcher said. A culinary director position for the Parry Sound property, opening in spring. Full creative authority over the food program, sourcing, menu development, kitchen culture, staffing. No one's name goes on the menu cards except the person who actually designed the dishes. The last sentence landed quietly, and they both knew why. What about this restaurant? She asked. That's your decision. I'm not asking you to leave tonight. I'm asking you to have a conversation. He picked up the notebook, closed it. You can bring Margot to the site visit if you want. There's a good school in Parry Sound. And a lake even better than this one, if that's possible. She almost laughed. You researched the schools. I research everything, he said. You know that. You watched me do it for a week. She looked at him. Fletcher Crane in a good jacket who had reorganized her walk-in refrigerator and asked about honey, and listened to her 7-year-old daughter explain the color of tired green water with the seriousness it deserved. I need time, she said. Take it, he said. I'll be at table 4, she told Dex first. She wasn't sure why. Possibly because Dex had been standing next to her for 3 years and had handed her the cloth on the morning of the espresso incident without comment, which was its own kind of loyalty. He was quiet for a while after she explained. Then he said, Is the pay better? Significantly. Will you have your own kitchen? From the ground up. Another pause. The morning prep moved around them, indifferent to the conversation. I've been thinking about going back to school, Dex said finally. Culinary management program. I looked it up in June, but I didn't say anything because he stopped. I didn't know if things were going to change. Things are going to change, Nessa said. He nodded slowly. Then I guess we're both figuring something out. She told Margot on Sunday morning at the kitchen table, with Gerald the basil on the windowsill, and the unnamed thyme in the corner, and the October light coming in at a low angle that made everything look slightly golden. Margot ate her toast. She looked out the window. She looked back at Nessa. Is Parry Sound near a lake? She asked. Yes. A good lake? A very good lake. Margot considered this with appropriate gravity. And will the kitchen be yours? Nessa looked at her daughter, small and accurate and named after a grandmother neither of them had met. A grandmother who had apparently also had a habit of being right about things. Yes, she said. It'll be mine. Margot picked up her toast. Okay, she said, with the decisive calm of someone who had already considered all available evidence and reached a conclusion the rest of the world was simply catching up to. Then we should go. She paused, toast halfway to her mouth, with the faintly distracted look that meant something else had occurred to her. The time, she said. I think I know its name now. What is it? Fletcher, Margot said. It just seemed right. And Nessa Fairbanks sat back in her chair and laughed. A real laugh. The kind that surprises you, the kind that feels like the first honest thing you've done in a long time. While the October light came through the window, and the lake somewhere beyond the tree line sat in its gray-green September colors, and the little pot of thyme called Fletcher sat quietly in its corner, doing exactly what it had always been doing. Exactly what it was meant for, just waiting for someone to finally notice.